but each line would represent one command that you would enter at the command line. So if you had, this particular script had about 200 lines. So if you had a 200-line script, it's, you know, almost like entering 200 different commands at a command line, which you can imagine would take a long amount of time, but using this, it makes it a lot easier. One of the other projects I worked on that was kind of ever-present, whenever I had a spare amount of time, I would do a little bit of web development for the Forker website. I mean, it's nothing fancy, no e-commerce, strictly marketing purposes to, you know, let people know what services they offered, where. First step was to do a little research on who was hosting the site, or actually no one was hosting the site, but the domain registration was with Stargate, and they were also their ISP at the Forker offices. So my suggestion was to, since there was already bandwidth available and already hardware available, to set up a web server to host the site on. My suggestion was a Red Hat 7.1 operating system with Apache. Like I said, nothing terribly fancy. What we ended up using was a Microsoft Small Business Server, because they also, not only did they want this particular machine to serve the function of a file server and a web server, but they also wanted an Exchange server. So I did a little diagram of what their network is. I mean, it's nothing fancy. They have the DSL connection and a piece of hardware called a Sonic Wall. It basically serves two purposes. It's a firewall and a network address translation router, which means through the DSL service provider, they're given one IP address, and then for the 5 machines they have in their office, those are all local IP addresses, and then it translates it and sends it to the external internet, and then back again it'll redirect the traffic into the correct machine. This was one of my final projects. I had to set up this server that I just talked about. Ran Windows 2000 Small Business Server, which is specifically marketed to small businesses with less than 50 client machines. Obviously, we only have 5, so it's appropriate. Primary services were the file services for everyone in the 3 employees that worked in the office. All the rest of the employees worked at client site. Secondary service was the web server, and finally the Exchange email server. This wasn't a terribly difficult project to do, because I've done lots of network operating system installations before, but I've never done this particular operating system install, so it was a learning experience. Miscellaneous projects, I consider anything that spent less than 20 hours a miscellaneous project. Did a memory installation at Alborg Industries. They had 8 workstations that needed some, I think, 128 megs additional RAM installed. Took about an hour. Russell Forker, who is the president and CEO of the company, got a new computer, so I was the one that got to set it up, since I was the intern. Lessons learned. First one is professional communication. My manager, I was very rarely located. I very rarely worked in the offices where he was, and a lot of times he wasn't there. He was at meetings, so I always had to keep him informed of what I was doing, what I was working on. So email and telephone communications crucial, as we've already established. Sun Solaris 8 and Sun hardware. I learned a ton about this. I mean, I've done a lot with Linux and BSD and SCO, lots of x86-based Unixes. This was my first time ever working with Sun hardware and Solaris on UltraSpark. Really interesting. I mean, there's so much more to it than I thought. Like I said before, a PC is a PC is a PC. Not so. There's lots and lots of different hardware out there. Inter-organizational communication. And what I mean by that is GE was a client of Forker Group. And just kind of witnessing the communication that went on between Forker Group and GE as a consulting company, it was interesting. I mean, you just learn a lot about the day-to-day operations of what it's like to work or run a consulting company. Consulting, I've already said I'm going into consulting, and it was great that I got to work at this company because that's what they do. And one of my goals, reinforce confidence as a problem solver. That's basically what a consultant does, is they solve problems. And I think I've come away with this whole experience with renewed and reinforced confidence. That's it. So if anyone has any questions,